It all starts with a ship drifting through the endless void of space. Then, a slight eye movement reveals someone is still alive inside. His name is Ryland Grace. An automated voice asks him a simple question, "What's 2 + 2?" But he doesn't answer, so the cognitive check fails right away, making it clear something's seriously off. Not long after, he manages to see Yao Lijie, the ship's captain, and another crew member, but both of them look dead. That's when it hits Ryland just how bad things are. He's completely alone, lost in space, confused, disoriented, and on the edge of breaking down. He tries to figure out what's going on. He has no idea why there's a microscope on the ship or what he's even doing there. He starts moving through the place carefully, looking for answers. He tries to talk to the captain, but the ship's AI confirms the obvious. He's dead, and Ryland is the only one left alive. Desperate, he tries to reach Earth, but gets an even more unsettling response. They've been traveling for 11 years, 10 months, 14 days, and 6 hours. The weight of time hits him hard. He tries to figure out how far they've gone, looks for the sun's position, but can't find it. It's like he's completely outside of everything he's ever known. Ryland then starts analyzing the ship's fuel, trying to run the numbers and make sense of his situation, but nothing adds up. The math just doesn't work. His mind feels broken. He can't remember how he even got there, but little by little, blurry memories of his past start coming back. He sees himself in a classroom, teaching a group of kids. He used to be a science teacher. In one of those classes, the students ask him about the Petrova line. Ryland explains that a scientist named Irina Petrova discovered a strange anomaly, a beam of red light stretching from the sun all the way to Venus. That phenomenon became known as the Petrova line. When they sent a probe to investigate it, they found something terrifying, an unknown life form that seemed to be feeding on the sun's energy, slowly dimming it. This could cause Earth's temperature to drop by 10 to 15 degrees over the next 30 years, putting all life on the planet at risk. The kids, scared, ask if they're going to die, but Grace, trying to keep things together, reassures them that everything will be fine, that nothing's going to happen. Back in the present, Ryland realizes those memories are pieces of his old life. He accepts that he's alone on the ship and starts adapting to his new reality. He decides to shave his beard, find some food, and go through everything around him. Among the items, he finds photos of the crew, now all dead. Little by little, his memory keeps piecing itself back together. He opens his personal compartment and finds his belongings. The loneliness starts hitting him hard, pushing him to the point where he's even dancing with a toy, while day after day, he keeps taking notes, trying to hold on to his sanity. In another memory from the past, Eva Stratt, the head of the Petrova team, visits Dr. Grace. She tells him she needs his help since the scientific community turned on him after he refused to walk back a controversial claim. She insists that despite everything, they still need him. While they're talking, Carl shows up, the guy in charge of security for the Petrova team. He's with Eva Stratt and makes it clear just how serious things are. Eva Stratt explains to Ryland Grace that samples from the Petrova line have fallen to Earth, and she needs him to figure out exactly what they are. That's when the doctor realizes how big this really is. The sun is actually dying. Because of this, they bring him into the project and assign him the task of analyzing the samples, warning him that they're extremely dangerous. For that reason, he's the only one allowed to handle them. And just like that, Dr. Ryland Grace begins examining them with extreme care, slowly pushing his investigation forward. After long hours of observation, he reports that the samples show movement. At first, his explanation feels kind of tedious to everyone else, but after pushing it for hours, he finally makes a crucial discovery. It's a living cell. The finding sparks immediate excitement in the room, but it doesn't last long because just minutes later, the cell dies. Instead of giving up, Grace focuses on figuring out how to keep it alive. He determines it's mainly made up of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, with a structure that's almost entirely water. On top of that, he notices it gives off a red glow when it moves, with a wavelength that matches the Petrova line. That leads him to a key question. If these cells come from the sun's environment, why are they heading toward Venus? Faced with that, Eva Stratt tells him there are hundreds of biologists around the world working on it, and that sooner or later they'll get answers, basically shutting him out at that point. Grace is removed from the project, but he refuses to walk away. So even though he only has has 3 samples left, on top of the one he already lost. Eva Stratt brings him back in. Back in the present, Ryland keeps rebuilding his memory, slowly starting to understand what really happened. In another moment from the past, Dr. Ryland Grace is talking with Carl, the agent assigned to his security. During their conversation, Grace throws out a hypothesis. If these organisms live in the sun, why would they travel to Venus? Is it because of the atmosphere? But Venus is mostly made of carbon dioxide, which makes the whole thing even more puzzling. Those questions push him to dig deeper into how the astrophage actually behaves. Since Grace doesn't have the money or resources, he uses Carl's access to get what he needs. Together, they buy different equipment and set up a rough experiment to simulate the conditions of the Sun and Venus. While they're running the tests, something unexpected happens. The astrophage manages to escape. Even then, Grace stays calm and, based on what he's observed, decides to shut off the lights. The move works. They manage to recover 3 samples, but then they notice something strange. There's one more than before. Without wasting time, Grace calls Eva Stratt and, excited, tells her that he and Carl have just become parents because they've discovered the astrophage can reproduce. Not long after, he's brought in front of other scientists, where he's introduced as the one who figured out how these organisms reproduce. Grace explains that by simulating Venus's conditions, he figured out why the astrophage is heading there. It's not random. It's because that environment lets them reproduce. When they ask how they could speed up that process, Grace doesn't fully get what they're really aiming at. That's when Eva Stratt makes a key call. She gives him full access to Project Hail Mary. From that point on, Ryland Grace starts seeing the full picture. The sun isn't the only star that's dying. There's another star, Tau Ceti, about 11.9 light-years away, that isn't being affected by this phenomenon. That anomaly becomes humanity's only real hope. So they decide to build a ship capable of getting there and finding out why. The problem isn't the ship itself, it's the energy needed to power it. That's when they find the answer in the astrophage itself. These organisms can store massive amounts of energy, making them the perfect fuel. The plan is insanely ambitious. Build a ship that can reach speeds close to the speed of light. But there's a major catch. There won't be enough fuel for a return trip, so any information they gather will have to be sent back using probes. Worried, Ryland Grace asks who the astronauts are going to be, and if they're basically being sent to die. The answer is clear. Most likely, yeah. Even though Eva Stratt tries to soften it, she doesn't hide the truth. If they do nothing, humanity faces something even worse. Total collapse, where hunger and desperation would drive people to tear each other apart. She also makes it clear the mission only needs 3 key crew members: a pilot, an engineer, and a scientist. Back in the present, Ryland Grace, now fully aware of his situation, looks at the photos of his dead crewmates. With a melancholic tone, he says he wishes he had gotten to know them better, even joking about the goofy faces they made in the pictures. Then he says goodbye to the engineer, talking to her like she can still hear him. He admits they were good people who deserved way more than this, but promises he'll do everything he can to make sure their sacrifice wasn't for nothing. Not long after, the ship tells him he's approaching Tau Ceti's orbit. The observation system, the spectroscope, kicks in, letting him analyze what's in that star system. Using red light, he detects a Petrova line, but unlike the sun, this one isn't draining the star. Still, when he takes a closer look, he finds something unsettling: a massive object. Realizing the danger, Grace tries to run, but it's pointless. No matter where he goes, the unknown ship follows him. With no options left, he gives up and leaves the pilot's seat. That's when the other ship sends something toward him. Grace has no idea if it's a message or a threat. He even considers it might be a bomb. He tries to activate the shields, but then it hits him. The Hail Mary doesn't have any defense systems. The only way to intercept it is to go outside. Even though he hesitates at the last second, he ends up getting forced out and has no choice but to act. Using quick thinking, he manages to grab the object and make it back to the ship, but he can't open it under normal conditions. That makes him remember a conversation from the past, where Eva Stratt was arguing with another scientist about how certain instruments wouldn't work properly in Tau Ceti because of the gravity differences. The solution was obvious: adapt. Following that idea, Grace shuts down the ship's artificial gravity, and just like that, he finally manages to open the device. Inside, he finds something unexpected, a map. It seems to show the location of whoever sent it. Realizing the opportunity, Grace marks Earth's position and sends the object back. Hours later, the object comes back. This time, the response is more direct. The other ship deploys some kind of connecting tunnel to the Hail Mary. Everything is swallowed by darkness. Despite the fear, Grace decides to move forward. He opens the ship's compartments and steps into the tunnel. As he crosses over, he's completely blown away. The alien ship has technology way beyond his own. Stunned, he starts examining the material it's made of, trying to make sense of something that, until recently, felt impossible. When he reaches the other side, Ryland Grace is suddenly confronted by a strange, arm-like structure that appears in front of him. It moves his arm along with a model of himself and his ship. Even though Grace doesn't fully understand the message, he gets the feeling it's telling him to go back. With no better option, he listens and returns, ending up alone again. Not long after, he notices something unsettling. The small alien's ship starts copying his every move exactly. Every maneuver, every shift, perfectly mirrored. Curious, Grace decides to gear up and go back through the tunnel. This time, he brings along a rough attempt at communication. Using Raman, he's put together a model of the other species' ship. As he crosses over, the alien approaches him. Grace notices the creature is copying every single one of his movements, like it's learning in real time. As strange as it is, he doesn't feel fear. He moves closer carefully and realizes something even more unsettling. The being doesn't have a face like a human. Still, that doesn't stop him, and little by little, he manages to form a first connection. The alien points to another object, a new gift. Grace opens it, and even though he doesn't understand it right away, he thanks it anyway. He's about to leave when he notices something important. The object seems to represent a molecular structure. 2 rings connected, 8 elements, oxygen. That's when it clicks. The alien just gave him oxygen. Even then, he hesitates. Taking off his helmet could kill him if he's wrong, but after a few tense seconds, he decides to take the risk and removes it. To his surprise, he survives. That moment changes everything. Grace realizes that if they're both going to solve the mystery of the Petrova line and save their worlds, they need to learn how to communicate. He starts simple. Using a measuring tape, he tries to establish patterns, numbers, some kind of logic. At first, the alien doesn't get it, but Grace doesn't give up. He also realizes the creature lives in an ammonia-filled environment, completely incompatible with human life. Even so, he introduces himself as Grace, and since the alien can't pronounce it, he ends up calling him Rocky. Over time, they start building a basic language. Grace teaches him simple concepts like yes and no, while Rocky responds in his own way. Day after day, Grace keeps teaching him words and documents the whole process, planning to eventually send it back to Earth. He explains that their atmospheres are incompatible. Rocky's would kill him, and his would do the same to Rocky. Still, communication keeps improving. Even when Rocky doesn't understand something, Grace falls back on simple methods, visuals, rough sketches, to get the idea across. Eventually, they manage to exchange crucial information. Both of them realize their stars are dying for the same reason. This isn't just about Earth anymore, it's a shared problem. Using a translation system he develops, Grace builds up a vocabulary of over 200 shared words. At that point, he shows Rocky an astrophage, and Rocky reacts instantly, making it clear it's a threat on his world too. Grace then asks about his crew, and the answer is devastating. There were 23 of them, but they're all dead. Rocky doesn't know exactly how, only that he's the sole survivor. He asks how many humans were on Grace's ship, and Grace tells him there were 3, but the other 2 died along the way. They both grasp the same harsh truth. They're completely alone. Yet they also understand something else. They're the last hope. They decide to work together. Rocky wants to save his star, and Grace his. In that moment, an unlikely alliance is formed, joining forces to save their worlds. Over time, their communication gets even better. Grace experiments with different voices in his system until he finds one that Rocky can understand, giving them a clearer way to talk. Despite the progress, Grace still doesn't remember how he ended up on the mission, but Rocky assures him he'll figure it out when he returns. Before resting, Grace tells Rocky he's going to sleep, which worries him deeply. Rocky explains that in his experience, he's watched over his crew for a long time, but they never woke up, so he decides to stay awake and watch over Grace while he sleeps. That's when Grace realizes something important about Rocky's species. While one sleeps, another stays alert to protect them. Grace comes to understand a fundamental survival rule in Rocky's species. If anyone is in danger, they must be awakened immediately. There's always someone watching. No one sleeps without protection. This idea hits him hard. In a memory from the past, Eva Stratt introduces Ryland Grace to the crew members who will be traveling on the ship. During the conversation, a disturbing detail comes up. All of them have accepted that they'll probably die, and they've even been given the option to choose how. Still, they carry on. As part of the project, they've developed a system to fight the astrophage, an infrared emitter designed to lure them into a trap that destroys them with intense radiation. This is necessary because astrophages store massive amounts of energy. Even a tiny amount can produce enough heat to melt metal in milliseconds. When they test the system, it's a stark reminder of just how dangerous these creatures really are. Back in the present, Ryland Grace finally comes to an uncomfortable truth. He didn't want to go into space like the others. He wasn't a willing volunteer, ready to sacrifice himself, but now he's there, and there's no turning back. The only thing left is to keep going. Together with Rocky, he decides they'll do everything possible to save their worlds. Over time, Rocky adapts better to living alongside Grace and appears inside a small ammonia sphere, letting him get closer to Grace's environment without risking himself. They start sharing the space more directly. Rocky even starts organizing the workspace, showing Grace how to structure his environment according to his own logic. Despite their differences, they develop a functional rhythm together, though Grace can't help but notice that some of Rocky's habits, especially the way he eats, are pretty strange. During their research, Grace discovers something worrying. Rocky's species doesn't understand the concept of radiation. This leads him to a chilling hypothesis. The astrophages had been stored near Rocky's workspace, which could have exposed his crew to lethal radiation. That might actually be the real reason all his teammates died. As they move forward, Grace explains to Rocky that the Petrova line isn't static. It's constantly shifting. They'll need to use planetary gravity to position themselves correctly within the line to study the phenomenon accurately. In a quieter moment, Grace invites Rocky to experience a simulation of Earth. The experience is intense for the alien, until the conversation takes an unexpected turn. Grace notes that Rocky seems to miss a partner. Rocky admits he doesn't have one right now, though he did in the past. He remembers how she used to tell him he lived with his head in the clouds, disconnected from the real world. And over time, he realized she was right. Now, she's moved on with someone else. So Grace asks Rocky how long he's been with his partner. The answer is surprising: 186.3 years. And even so, he feels it's not enough. Continuing their mission, they find a planet that works as a testing ground. There, they start experimenting with different ways to destroy the astrophages, searching for a final solution that could save their worlds. In another memory, Grace relives a moment before the journey. All the crew members, aware they'll probably die, decide to enjoy the time they have left. They sing, celebrate, and say goodbye to life with a mix of joy and resignation. But Grace feels completely out of place. Uncomfortable, he approaches Eva Stratt and asks if she feels the same way, since he hasn't seen her join the celebration. She tells him she can sing, and even though the situation is extreme, she has faith the mission will succeed because she believes in God. Later, Eva starts singing. That simple gesture brings a smile to Grace's face and for a moment lifts the weight of the moment. Back on the ship, in the present, Grace shows Rocky a star he's been studying, which he calls 1E. Rocky, using his own logic, says that name is basically like Tau Ceti E and finds it boring. So Grace decides to make it more interesting, turning the moment into a kind of show of his own, complete with red light flashes. In the lighter mood, he even gives Rocky's partner a human name, Adrian, and they decide to use that name for the planet they're testing on. Grace comes to a troubling conclusion. If the astrophages travel to reproduce, there should be a lot more of them. Digging deeper into his research, he notices something unexpected. Other forms of life exist on that planet, cells different from the astrophages, similar to those from their own worlds. In fact, he discovers these new life forms act as natural predators of the astrophages, taking them out. He realizes the key isn't destroying the astrophages directly, but using their predator, the cells from the planet they've named Adrian. If they can can bring this life form back to their respective worlds, they could stop the threat. As he records everything, Rocky shows up and starts taking part in the logs too, trying to figure out how to communicate with Earth. At that moment, he asks Grace why he doesn't just explain everything once he gets home. That's when Grace finally tells him the truth. His ship has enough fuel to get there, but not enough to come back. He's not returning. Rocky gets angry hearing this, reminding him that he said he would. Grace, resigned, tries to calm him down, saying that at least he's had the chance to experience something extraordinary with him, and it's okay if this is his end. He assures Rocky he has enough provisions to survive a couple more years, but Rocky doesn't accept it. For him, if there's a way to help, it must be done. He asks how many astrophages Grace needs to complete the plan. Grace says roughly 2 million kilograms. Without hesitation, Rocky offers to help, even if it means returning to his planet 6 years later. He admits he watched his entire crew die without being able to do anything, and he's not willing to go through that again. If Grace is going to die, he'll do everything he can to prevent it. The gesture hits Grace hard. He can't hold back the tears. They seal their decision with a hug and carry on with the mission, starting to collect the samples they need. During one of these maneuvers, Grace goes out to retrieve the collector, but an accident happens. He loses control, and the device slips from his hands. Still, he manages to grab it and get back to the ship, but the situation is getting more complicated. Being so close to the source, the ship starts to fail and fuel begins to leak. In a desperate attempt to stabilize the system, Grace releases a compartment, but he gets it wrong and ejects the wrong module. When he tries to fix it, the abrupt movements damage the ship even more. In the end, he's trapped in the pilot's seat, completely immobilized. Seeing the danger, Rocky leaves his ammonia sphere and exposes himself to Grace's environment, a move extremely risky for him. His body starts to deteriorate slowly, evaporating under the incompatible conditions. Still, he manages to save Grace and get him to safety. As Grace regains consciousness, his mind drifts back to the past. In that memory, the truth is revealed. There was a miscalculation in one of his investigations that caused a facility to explode, killing the entire scientific team slated for the mission, except for 2. That's why a replacement was urgently needed. Grace wasn't a volunteer. He was chosen because he was the only expert on astrophages available. He wasn't an astronaut, he wasn't prepared, but he fit the requirements. On top of that, he had no close family or responsibilities tying him down. He was given barely 3 hours to accept. Back in the present, Grace wakes up and follows the marks Rocky left on the floor. He finds that Rocky managed to return to his ammonia environment, but he's in really bad shape. He's alive, but unconscious. Grace realizes the seriousness of the situation. If Rocky isn't watched over, he might never wake up. So he does what he learned from him, stays awake, taking care of him. Meanwhile, he keeps recording messages. He explains that he's tried multiple ways to keep Rocky alive, even building a heat lamp. In one recording, he leaves a final message. No matter what happens, they have to save both planets. Then he continues with the experiment. He mixes the new cells from the planet Adrian with the collected astrophages, and it works. The astrophages start dying. His theory was correct. He names this organism Taumeba, the astrophage's natural predator. Excited, he tells the sleeping Rocky that he's found the solution. Now they have what they need to save their worlds. There's just one thing left: producing enough astrophages for the trip and getting the Taumeba to their respective planets. But he still needs Rocky, since he wouldn't know how to transport his share of Taumeba to his world. Exhausted, Grace finally falls asleep. Later, Rocky wakes up. Their reunion is deeply emotional. Without a word, they embrace. Grace shows Rocky the breeding system he designed, and it's working perfectly. Thanks to their discoveries, they decide to celebrate with a little party just between the two of them. As a gesture of friendship, Grace gives Rocky a few gifts: a laptop with information about Earth and a small ball shaped like him. Rocky, touched, says he'll never forget him, though he admits he hasn't brought any gifts. In return, Grace asks to see Rocky's ship. Equipped with special ammonia protection, he enters Rocky's environment, marveling at the alien technology. At that moment, a memory from the past hits him hard. Grace confesses to Eva Stratt that he can't carry out the mission, hoping they'll find another solution. He tries to justify himself, saying that in 30 years, the world population would suffer devastating losses, but he still can't summon the courage. Eva Stratt, firm and unyielding, Dlming insists that he must do it. Seeing that he won't budge, she takes an extreme measure. She orders him captured and induced into a coma ahead of schedule. That's how, against his will, Ryland Grace is sent into space. Visiting Rocky's ship brings all those memories flooding back. Finally, he understands the truth. He never wanted to go, but it doesn't matter anymore. Now he's here, and everything depends on him. When it's time to say goodbye, Rocky tells him that no one will be watching him while he sleeps anymore, but that he's incredibly brave, the bravest man he knows, and the only one. They part ways in their own language, touching arms, sealing a friendship that crosses species. Then, each heads toward their own destination. Grace prepares for a 4-year, 11-month journey. But something unexpected happens. The systems detect an anomaly. Investigating, he finds a leak. The Taumeba has escaped and evolved. He immediately realizes the danger and thinks of Rocky. If these organisms consume his fuel, the ship will fail. And if that doesn't kill him, the radiation will. A slow, painful death awaits, completely alone. At that moment, he faces the hardest decision of his life. He can't do everything. He either goes back home or saves Rocky. There's no middle ground. Before deciding, he secures the most important thing. He sends probes to Earth with all the information, enough Taumeba samples, and every record of his discoveries with Rocky. Humanity will have a chance. Then he makes his choice. His mission is no longer to return, it's to save his friend. After a long and risky journey, he finally finds Rocky's ship. He reaches the ship and starts making contact. After a few tense moments, Rocky appears, and they're finally reunited. Back on Earth, Eva Stratt receives Grace's recordings and shipments, confirming that the solution has arrived. Sometime later, we see Grace living on Rocky's planet, Arid. There, Rocky and his partner, whom Grace named Adrian, have recreated a version of Earth's speeches so he can feel more at home in that alien environment. Finally, they make him an offer to become a science teacher. Grace accepts, and so begins a new life, teaching Rocky's species, passing on all his knowledge, closing his story not as a traditional hero, but as someone who found purpose in the unexpected. If you liked it, don't forget to hit like on the video and subscribe for more content. That's it for today. See you next time.